Hello everybody, welcome back to another one of these collection videos, and this time it is the early 90s TV series Northern Exposure. Northern Exposure is the story of a young Dr. Joel Fleischman, fresh out of residency, who is obligated to work for the state of Alaska to pay off the cost of his education by serving a period of time, which is eventually expanded over the course of the series, in the very small rural town of Sicily, Alaska. And it is such an amazing show because it is one of those premises that hinges entirely upon the characters. There's nothing extraordinary like a journey to something in space or some giant military conflict or some impending doom, or there's nothing like that to really propel the story along. It really is just a series based solely on the interactions and lives of its characters. And I really enjoy a show like that when it works, because it's so hard to do with so many different shows. Even a really good show will occasionally have a bad episode or one or two characters that just don't seem to really work or mesh with the rest of the cast, or they don't get fleshed out enough over time and it gets stale. So when a show doesn't have that other element and it really just relying completely 100% on the characters, their writing, and the portrayal by the actors, that has to be done so expertly. It has to be near perfect to really work and to keep the audience engaged. And this is one of the few shows that really accomplishes that, and it flourishes in that way. The characters are all so incredibly memorable. They have such amazing interactions with each other, so many completely different personalities existing in this small town, and it makes you feel like it is a living, breathing community. You can get a sense of what it would be like to live there with all these different people, and you get a great evolution of the relationships of these characters over time, and also a whole lot of backstory over the years, fleshing out the lives of these characters and giving them a lot of depth, to the point where it's the kind of show where if at some point a main character, which eventually does happen in this show, leaves, the show could completely exist and just roll right on without that character, because all the other people in the cast are so interesting that it doesn't just rely on one star to really get by. And that brings to the conflict later on I'll talk about getting through the show. The show did last for 6 seasons, but you'll see I only have 4 DVD sets here. The slightly shorter season 1 and 2. Moving on to season 3 and 4. And 5 and 6 I do not own, because those are not ones I would ever rewatch. The thing about Northern Exposure, again, when I was talking about the character relationships, and the other thing that helps make it stand out, though, is the surrealism and the very sort of mystical, magical, very contemplative elements, to where you're frequently seeing people's daydreams. You are experiencing people's imaginations as they're represented on screen, even like hallucinations or like spirit journeys, any of that kind of stuff you're actually seeing and experiencing on screen. And there are certain entire episodes where the premise is very surreal and magical, like a bear falling in love with Maggie and her kind of falling in love with this bear in human form, that type of thing. And that's one of the more interesting ideas in this, and you get a lot with Chris and his half-brother and the sharing of dreams and things, and just some beautiful episodes come of those ideas integrated into what's otherwise a very realistic seeming setting and story, and it loses a little bit of that in its later seasons. And the other thing is that it feels like it loses a little bit of the charm in the writing, and I don't know, it just kind of loses steam in the last seasons. 4 is really, for me, the end and the pinnacle of the series in my mind is season 3 and 4. It just kind of loses that. And the other thing, too, is that behind the scenes there were issues with the actor who plays Dr. Joel Fleischman, who is the kind of, if you want to say, the main character, but it's really more of an ensemble. But he definitely thought of himself as the main character, and he, I guess, technically is. But there were issues behind the scenes and disagreements over pay and things like that between him and the producers, and that kind of soured the way his character evolved after season 4 to what I feel is a very just is not a satisfying ending for that character, and that filtered out, I feel like, into a lot of the other characters, and I don't like the way the story went in the last 2 seasons. There are a couple little standout episodes that are okay, but I would not rewatch those. When I rewatch, I only keep things in the collection. I want to rewatch over time, and for me, those first 4 seasons are magical. They are truly astounding in the way they are written and the way their characters are created. Fantastic show that you definitely should check out. Again, the first 4 seasons, seasons 1 and 2 are amazing, and they do there are a couple like really standout episodes. A couple of my absolute favorites, if I were to make like a top 10 episode or whatever, would be in these first 2 seasons. But overall, the series uses those first 2 seasons as building blocks to really just expand and become amazing. I think, and its pinnacle is season 3 and 4. I think these two, season 3 from the start all the way up to, I'd say, the big feast in season 4, like between that 2 markers is where I think it's at its absolute best. So those are my 2 favorite seasons. But if I had to pick one between the 2, season 3 is overall my favorite. It just has, if I had to line up, the episodes I really like, season 3 has a few more than season 4. So I added to the collection because of that, this older edition, this different version of the complete 3rd season in this slipcover that's kind of like a parka type thing. And then it opens up into a 3-disc set. So that is my DVD collection for the series, the first 4 seasons, and this additional thing of season 3. And I have one other release. There were a handful of releases on LaserDisc. There were no complete seasons or anything, and the episodes are not necessarily in chronological order, depending on the number of releases. They're all 2-episode collections, and I picked one that has my favorite episode of the entire series, plus another really good one, the last episode of season 3 and the first of season 4. We have Sicily and Northwest Passages. Northwest Passages is really great, an enjoyable episode, a good second one to have on this collection, but my favorite overall is Sicily. It is just done so well to where a former resident of Sicily, who's I think 108 years old, shows up in town and tells them the story of the early days of the town of Sicily, and all the actors from modern day Sicily play the people from back then. Of course, how they've done that in many other shows, or people playing their own ancestors, or versions of people in the past living in the same community. They do that very, very well, and it's such a standout episode because it is. It works really well to where you have these characters. Again, the show relies entirely on loving those characters and the way they work, and it steps out of that a bit by having them play different characters, and really shows the strength of the writing in that one in particular. It is an award-winning episode for a reason. It is done so masterfully. It is one of those kind of episodes that if you just watch that for the first time, you've never seen the show before or anything, it'll get you hooked on watching the series. You'll be like, wow, I gotta check this thing out. Start episode 1 and keep going. It's a great show. Again, after season 4, not quite as satisfying, and the show didn't, end on the kind of note that I wanted it to, but the first 4 seasons are brilliant. Check them out. They're really great. Season 1 and 2 are also fairly short, so they're very quick to get through, and the show, I think, is at its prime in season 3 and 4. It just is an amazing example of writing character relationships.